I'm going to walk through a little bit of a review of some of the major stories I think going on in the state. Stuff that you're not going to hear a lot about, particularly in our local press, but really, maybe cable news and things like that. Because I think some of these are not only important for us as Floridians, but also play a big role in understanding some of the national things that are going on right now. First and foremost, what is going on right now is session. We are in session within Tallahassee. There's a major overhaul going on with our education system right now. And this is a very important thing. First and foremost, last year they banned critical race theory from being taught within schools. But it's very easy to focus on critical race theory itself as a very specific sort of discipline, and yet have the intent of critical race theory, which is anti-white racism. It is othering. It is trying to blame, trying to transmit guilt onto people for things they did not do, right? And it's a discriminatory practice in the way they're trying to weaponize the curriculum to pursue a certain end. What's going on right now is that Florida's cracking down on this not only within the name of critical race theory, but also dealing directly with the trainings that are going on, not simply within the school system, but also within businesses. So, last year, for example, Coca-Cola got caught with, HR training, right? Trying to, instructing its white employees to embrace its whiteness and to transcend its whiteness and to recognize all of its guilt and things like that. What some of the legislation within Florida is doing is making sure that this is not allowed within the state, not only within the public education system, which is important, but also within corporate America that is fleeing to the state as a byproduct of the economic environment that we have right now, and the fact that it's been better to be in Florida than anywhere else in the country. This is very aggressive legislation. It is very controversial legislation. It is very important legislation. Here's a great clip from Governor DeSantis on this point.
When I cited some of these school districts across the country that are doing all these crazy things, I'm just thinking to myself, are you doing so good at reading and math and all these other things that you can divert all this attention to ideology and indoctrination? I mean, come on. Most of those places that are doing that are performing much worse than any place in Florida. And so we do have to, what Lakeisha said, is really focus on the foundations, on the basic pillars of what a good education is. And of course, certainly civics education is a big part of that. But by us protecting against CRT and this Stop Woke Act, we're going to be making sure that time in school is actually spent learning and not just being targets of indoctrination. And that is going to be a very good thing for parents throughout the state of Florida. What
DeSantis was calling out is that there is no demand naturally on the market within the education system for this stuff. This is something, this is an agenda that is being pushed by a certain group of people, as he calls it, an elite, that's trying to force this upon the population right now. And what we're seeing is a backlash not only in Florida, but this was a major issue with the Virginia elections and down the line. People are getting fed up with it. And the question is, do we have to allow this to go on in this country, or can Republicans in particular use state government to actually stop this and stop what is being done within the school system? Another aspect within this is something that has now become an attack from the corporate press. The White House itself is deemed in or chimed in. It is a bill that would forbid public schools within the state of Florida from pushing explicit LGBTQ plus whatever advocacy within the school system. And so what this bill would do would ban having school counselors being proactive and trying to enforce, you're a little girl that likes to, that's a little tomboyish. Have you ever considered that you might actually be a boy? Right? Stopping this sort of stuff that is going on within the school system right now. There's a poll that came out a couple weeks ago, and some of this polling, whenever you're doing polling data on the youngest, demographics out there, the error of margin is much higher there than it is in if you're polling 65 and the older. But it was a poll that showed that 40% of Generation Z identify as LGBTQ++. Now, you cannot tell me that this is a product of biology, that they are simply born this way. This is a product of culture. This is a product of institutions. This is a product of grooming. Now, that number may be skewed a little bit. There is something called a demisexual that is being, as part of this rainbow of various identifiers. What demisexual means is that you only have sexual feelings for someone that you're attracted to, or that you have an attachment to. Which really, I mean, congratulations, they've now turned heterosexual monogamy into a victim group here. But so some of that might be skewed a little bit. But again, this is something that's systemic within the institutions that is promoting, that we're seeing having a consequence on a generation of Americans. DeSantis is stopping up and stopping this. This is, again, very controversial. They are flooding Tallahassee with activists. They're using everything they can to try to make this the hate crime bill of 2022. What is interesting, however, is that remember a few years ago when North Carolina passed a ban on transgender bathrooms. What happened there? You had all of corporate America rise up and say, we can't allow this bigotry to go on, right? The NCAA pulled out their tournaments. When Georgia passed voting rights legislation last year, the MLB boycotted the All-Star game, and then the Braves won the World Series. But neither here nor there. Right? You had corporate America outraged that this was going on in this state. Guess what's happening right now? Has anyone heard Disney criticizing Ron DeSantis right now? Has Universal Studios Orlando come up saying, "Oh, we can't have this in this state because of whatever"? No. Why is that? I think it's Big Daddy Ron.
We got him open.
What we saw last year, I believe it was the last meeting we had of last year, was Ron DeSantis, his popularity, had made the rat knee on the issue of vaccine mandates. This is already paying off in other ways right now. Again, this is something that it's big. This is controversial. Again, we're gonna keep hearing about it from activist base, but this stuff is done. DeSantis wanted it; it gets done. Another thing DeSantis wanted. This is very interesting. You're not going to be able to read this because it's a tweet. But this is a bill actually pushed by our friend John Ward over in Walton County that would protect the right of physicians to freedom of speech. That there was a major issue where if you spoke out as a physician, as a medical professional, on a controversial topic, whether it be related to uncontroversial or a non-approved treatment for COVID, or a comment that was deemed politically incorrect, whatever, what you saw were hate mobs that would then target medical associations and licensing boards, those sort of third-party intermediaries that allow you to practice. And what they could do is that they could not only get you fired from your position, but they could render all the training, those years of your life, the hundreds of thousands of dollars that go into becoming a doctor in today's world, they could deprive you from being able to make to practice what you have trained your entire life to do, with just enough outrage. What's interesting is that while this has been acted on in the Senate, the House was kind of dragging its feet. And then a couple weeks ago, Ron DeSantis came out and said, "This legislation is important. This is a major issue." This came shortly after in Congress. You had a hearing about the treatment of physicians, and you had a doctor from California basically saying that, look, you have a lot of doctors that are keeping their head down, that feel they have to censor themselves because they know they will be attacked by California licensing boards. That came out on like Monday. This tweet came out on Wednesday. Once again, an example of Ron DeSantis picking up legislation, identifying what is important. Because of this, guess what? The House is getting this done. Because guess what? Ron DeSantis gets what Ron DeSantis wants in Tallahassee these days. One last thing on the culture war side of things is that another controversial bill is an abortion bill that would limit abortions to 15 weeks. Again, this is important only to highlight how Ron DeSantis is leveraging his power that he has taken with all the stuff that we've seen after COVID and the economic success of the state. And he's transforming this into culture war issues and some of the standing stuff. So again, this is DeSantis kind of flexing his might here and willing to take on controversial views would have been very easy to kind of just rest on his laurels after COVID. And because of this, there's an article from Politico. Ron DeSantis is now being recognized as arguably the most powerful governor in the history of the state of Florida. And this goes a lot into what we talked about in previous meetings. But he is now effectively not only the governor, but the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, and the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court. So says a member of the Florida House. And again, this is unusual. This is not normal. And this is what happens when you save a state from tyranny. When you create a condition based off your own leadership that allows a place like Buster's. I was talking to Buster before the meeting. Last year was the best year they ever had. Why? It's because of Ron DeSantis and his judgment here. And now he has power. And he's willing to use it in ways that are interesting. Again, this is a video. I'm not going to go into it. Another very interesting brouhaha this happened a couple weeks ago is that Nikki Fried explicitly compared Ron DeSantis to Hitler. And what's funny is that she goes on. This is an interview with I believe it's a local like NPR affiliate. And what's funny is like the NPR affiliate saying, "You're a little crazy." Like she talks about like, "Oh, Ron DeSantis. When I go into these Hispanic communities in South Florida, and they fled this tyranny of communist governments and these dictators, and I see what's going on in this state with Ron DeSantis. Like, we have a fascist leader, leading our country." And she's like, "Really?" He's like, "You think it's that strong?" It's like, I'm a student of history. I saw the rise of Hitler, which I doubt. Yeah. And you know what? Ron DeSantis is just like Hitler. And then the NPR lady says, wait, Hitler? You really mean Hitler? Don't you kind of lose the case when you compare it to Hitler? No, I mean Hitler. And this is just kind of like Nikki Fried would just keep digging and digging on this issue where, again, she was too insane for the NPR local affiliate here. Now, surprise, surprise, this is fundraising numbers, and you might not be able to see it. Nikki Fried raised a grand total of $312,000 in January. That is significantly lower than Charlie Crist's little over about $715,000. And then a woman named Annette Taddeo. If you don't know that she's running for governor, well, most people don't either. She raised less than $200,000. Ron DeSantis raised $10 million. So this is a good sign right here. Again, amazing what happens when you protect the businesses of Floridians. And again, this is even harder to read, but this is just some polling that's going on right now just to understand where the setting is. Ron DeSantis right now is at 49-43 with Charlie Crist. He performs even better with Nikki Fried, 51-40. We have a very good chance right now. We are trending towards double-digit victory for Ron DeSantis right now in 2022. And our little friend Marco Rubio, he is at 49%, beating Val Demings at 41%. They keep pumping in money within Val Demings' race right now. I hope they keep doing it, just like they kept pumping in money to beat Mitch McConnell. I think it's going to go just as well. But basically, the idea that Florida is still a purple state, probably not likely based off what we're seeing right now. So, that's a kind of a rundown on some of the news right now. I do know that we have a candidate here running for office in Panama City Beach. I'm going to give him a few minutes to introduce himself to the group. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Meade, running for Panama City Beach, Ward 1.
Hello, everyone. I'm running for City Council, Panama City Beach, Ward 1. And I addressed the City Council last week because this tourist development outfit has $36 million, and it excludes the people from getting a penny of it. So when I tell them that we need some of that money to blunt some of the 7.5% inflation and the $300 a month it's causing every family more now because of the stupid actions of a stupid administration, they tell me, well, you got to go to them. And I said, no, I elected you. They're not elected. I'm coming to you, so you go to them. So this is what I told them last week. The Tourist Development Council permits payments for the advertising and promotion of tourism within the state of Florida by Title 11, Chapter 125.0104, Section 5, Paragraph 3. With that in mind, I advocated for the creation of the Panama City Beach Resident Rebate Program. There is no greater advertisement for tourism on Panama City Beach than the hardworking people of Panama City Beach. They are the face of our great city. They are the main reasons that tourists come back to our beautiful beaches year after year. The welcoming residents of Panama City Beach has established relationships over the years with all of our valued visitors. The residents of Panama City Beach are indispensable to our economy and should be treated fairly. The residents of Panama City Beach are our ambassadors to the tourist industry and as such deserve compensation for the great work that they do. That is why I introduced and advocated for the Panama City Beach Resident Rebate Program. This program shall annually, on the Thursday before Thanksgiving, award to every resident of Panama City Beach over the age of 18 that has resided in our beautiful city continuously for the previous 12 months, a Panama City Beach rebate in the amount of $200. Our residents are our biggest asset when it comes to attracting and keeping tourists. They make the recommendations. They inform our guests about all of our great restaurants, attractions, and accommodations. They are the reason Panama City Beach is the premier vacation destination on the Emerald Coast, and they are the reason for the excellent service and quality experience that all of our loyal guests receive. They are the reason that this city, their city, is so successful. Then I told them I was hopeful that that august body will join me in correcting this slight to the great people of Panama City Beach. The very same people who are responsible for all of the tourist revenue that is generated through their efforts. Heretofore, all of the great people of Panama City Beach have been excluded from these extraordinary profits. And shamefully, in my humble opinion, this has been done intentionally. It's time to start to correct this gross injustice. It's time to show respect for the achievements of our people. It's time for this city to recognize and appreciate the hard work that our great residents undertake during all of our tourist seasons. How this came to be is anathema to me. What elected official would write a law excluding the very Panama City Beach residents that are responsible for the profitability of an entire city? And perhaps more telling, who would sit on their hands and do nothing while our citizens are unceremoniously disenfranchised? It's time to end this unfair practice. Let's all join together to fight this good fight. And that's what I told them, and I'm going to go back this time and I'm going to tell them about the Panama City Beach Solar Savings Program. I looked up the school budgets. It's $15 million for the electric bill for all of our schools in Bay County. We're in the Sunshine State. And their construction budget was $30 million. So if they take $4 million, put solar panels on all of the schools, we'll save that $15 million electric bill year after year, and that'll cause our taxable rates to go down. And then I told them, during the tourist season, we have so much traffic and so much congestion, we have to have auxiliary volunteer police that are here directing the traffic and making sure the flow keeps going. And the chief told me, well, we have that program, but nobody ever signs up for it. So then I told him, at Gulf Coast State College, they have the Florida Department law enforcement course, and they have all traffic parts of their curriculum. So one of the parts of their curriculum will be, directing traffic, 2-credit lab on Panama City Beach. I want to get in there and I want to start changing things, because they're not going to do anything voluntarily. Everybody has their little territory and nobody ventures outside of it. They're always telling you where you could go. So it's time to tell them where they could go. And please, if you could support me and vote for me, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
The main topic of tonight's talk is the Democrats' plan to steal 2022, which I think sounds good and scandalous enough, but really it is a scandal. What's going on right now is the Democrats are in trouble, and I think we all know it. Right here is the approval ratings right now for our dear president. He is now down, hovering right about 40 and trending in the wrong direction. He is only above 40 because of this little hiccup right here. That might be a polling error. If you look around, you won't be able to see them state by state, but these are all different states. Everything that's this color is a state that is divided as underwater. Everything that is this color is where he's still ahead. There's a grand total of 4 of them. One of them is Vermont, and they elected Bernie Sanders, so you can't trust them anyway. What's interesting, though, is that even these states that are technically over water, he doesn't crack 50% in any state in the union right now. California, he's like 45%. Crazy. This is a nationwide issue for the Democrats. This right here, a very specific demographic. This is Hispanic voters in America right now. He started off about 40% approval rating. Right here, when he took office. This is when they signed the first round of COVID, his first COVID stuff. This is when you start getting into, you've got the Afghanistan situation here. This is where you have the infrastructure bill, and you get a little bit of it, and then it goes back down. Nothing going on with COVID. Inflation keeps going up and up and up. And as inflation keeps going up and up and up, the approval ratings keep going down and down and down. And he is now underwater with Hispanic voters in America right now. Again, from 40 to -1. This is playing out with the way that people are viewing the economy. This is the Consumer Sentiment Index. Down here, this is the stuff you don't want to be in, right? This is the Great Recession right here. Don't want that. He is now about at Great Recession levels when it comes to the way that your average American views their confidence in the American economy. And considering gas prices over there at the Tom Thumb, perhaps we can understand why that is. Things are so bad that today was released a poll from one of the most accurate pollsters out there, Trafalgar Group. A generic Republican on a congressional ballot is up 12 percentage points over a generic Democrat. This survey overrepresents Democrats over Republicans by 3%. That ain't good if you're a Democrat. Here is a Senate race. Again, you can't read it. I'm going to read it for you. A generic Republican, they're still trying to figure out. I think they're going to try to get Cory Gardner to run. This is from the great state of Colorado, which has not been a purple state since before Obama. Generic Republican, very popular man, is up 1 percentage point over Senator Michael Bennet, who at one point was a presidential candidate, if you remember the good old days of the early, right up there with Marianne Williamson. But yeah, so Michael Bennet is underwater against generic Republican. Very interesting. Perhaps this explains this very strong pivot on COVID stuff that we've been seeing the past week, right? Where now natural immunity is not something that will get you banned on Twitter, but rather something that we must take into account when we're considering America's response right now to the virus. Biden's approval rating, as the Washington Post notes, continues to erode, including with the most vital parts of his base. And of course, I can't think of a more vital part of the Joe Biden base than CNN. And yet here, the audio won't play out, but here you've got John Tapper, complaining about the Biden administration's complete lack of interest in conducting a serious investigation on the pullout of Afghanistan. And as Tapper notes in this clip, it doesn't matter. He understands that Biden wants to defend the decision to withdraw from Afghanistan. I'm partial to that view as well. But the way we did it was criminal. The way we did it was an armed, we gave millions and millions and millions of dollars and equipment and Humvees and all this sort of stuff to the Taliban, which, not my favorite thing in the world, right? This is not a good policy. There should be an investigation on how you screw something up this badly. So when Joe Biden loses Jake Tapper, he has lost a great deal more, right? Now, how are Democrats going to respond? They're going to respond by doing what Democrats do. Play politics very shrewdly. This right here, you're not going to see it up there, but this is a map of the United States based off of congressional districts as we are looking into the changes going into the 2022 election. A lot of these states right here, they're still working on stuff. These ones that are kind of grayish right here, to those that can see, this means that they don't have anything proposed at the moment. We're going to get into some of the reasons why in just a second. All of this right here, though, these are formal accepted maps. Now, what is going on in these official fortified maps right now? Well, the answer, some problems. First and foremost, though, one of the parts of all the voting legislation bills that Democrats keep trying to push is a stop on gerrymandering, right? Because gerrymandering is this evil thing that Republicans do when they screw over the Democratic majority so that an out-of-touch white supremacist majority still maintains and oversights control of an allegedly democratic process, right? Well, this is a part of New York. You'll see right here where you've got like districts within districts. It's this, again, the fact that you've literally got these sort of things kind of grouped into much larger things. This is not, organic. You got a little bit of a river right here, right? So this is all connected. This is what gerrymandering looks like. It's like textbook 101. Mm-hmm. This right here, this district kind of looks like the head of like the Alien and the Alien versus Predator movies. It's kind of like It's also equally sinister. This is Jerry Nadler's district. This district is affectionately referred to as gerrymandering with a J. This here is a district in Philadelphia for another Democratic congressman. Yeah, that's very nice right there. Very organic, very natural. This right here, as our friend Charlie can tell you, this is Illinois. Illinois, they're going to make sure that they get every little bit of Democratic votes in the right spot as they can get. So you get these very natural-looking lines right here, like whatever the hell that is. This is the way politics is done, particularly in states like Illinois, right? This is what it means, like you're playing to win. This being said, my hat's off to the Democratic Party of Illinois because of this map right here. Adam Kinzinger will no longer be in Congress next year, so you know what? Silver linings and everything. I'm sure he'll have a very nice career in MSNBC. But again, this is what gerrymandering looks like. And again, I'm not even mad. I'm impressed. Like this is beautiful work right here. This is the way you want a political party to shape an election system to make sure that they're going to benefit as much as possible. Now, because of this, what you have right now is that of all the seats that we know about, the states that are firmed up and legit, the Democrats have given themselves, through gerrymandering alone, an advantage of 6 seats that they did not have prior to redistricting. Now, what's interesting is that the gains right here, they went from having 6 competitive Democrat seats to having 12 competitive Democrat seats. So this is a reason for perhaps some interest or optimism, because competitive seats in a year where we're reaching Great Recession levels in terms of the way we view the economy. When we've lost Jake Tapper from the Democrats, maybe some of these competitive seats become competitive R seats next year. So this is interesting, but because of gerrymandering alone, the Democrats have a 6-seat advantage in Congress that they did not have prior to 2022. And this is the way they're playing the game. They're unpopular, they know it, so they're going to use the unofficial tools to make sure they do everything they can to fortify their positions. Now, how are Republicans responding? Well, the Ohio State Supreme Court is, on paper, a majority Republican Supreme Court. Well, guess what? The Ohio Republicans passed a redistricting map. The Ohio Supreme Court throws it out because it's too crazy. Not quite as crazy as New York and Illinois, but crazy enough for the Ohio Supreme Court, which is pretending that this process is supposed to be non-political. They throw it out. Okay? That's. We are going to lose seats because of this. An analysis of what Ohio is going to look like after that ruling. Republicans are going to lose between 2 to 3 seats because of that one court ruling. So it goes. This right here was the North Carolina map that was proposed. We were going to gain a full seat, and we were going to cast what was a reliably or a strong Democrat seat into a competitive seat. Well, the North Carolina Supreme Court threw out this district as well, in spite of the fact the Supreme Court is nominally whatever. Okay, fine. So this stuff gets thrown out. We can't play by those rules. We don't get to have the same sort of fun the Illinois Democratic Party gets to have. So what does that mean? So this is exactly why, like Pennsylvania right here, another state with a lawsuit threw it out. They don't have anything proposed yet. Louisiana just put something in now that I think is going to maintain. I think it's an 8-1 swing seat there. But so where does that leave us? There was one very important ruling that went in our favor. This went in Alabama. Because what was happening in Alabama is that the Democratic Party of Alabama was trying to use the Voting Rights Act to give itself 2 seats using race kind of as a justifier. That we should have 2 black majority districts because of the way certain cities, certain parts of the state are lined up. And therefore the Voting Rights Act is supposed to protect these things, and therefore what is typically an Alabama congressional layout that gives the Democrats 1 vote is to give them 2 votes. Well, the Supreme Court did the right thing. They threw that out. This has ramifications within Louisiana and some of these other areas. And so this was a major win. This maintains a 6-1 seat advantage in Alabama, and this has ramifications for other states. So it's not all bad news. Once it got to the Supreme Court did its job. But so, we're playing from some different angles here. But then we get to Florida. Because Florida is where the action's at right now. All right, because of this, right now, Republicans, in spite of all that, we still have a two-seat advantage right now based off, some of these are new seats, right? So this is why some of the math works out still. One advantage, though, with the redistricting that we do have so far, in spite of the seats that are thrown, the states that have been thrown out, these solid Republican districts, we're up 11 solid Republican seats than what we did before. So they have gerrymandered in a way that fortified those Republican seats. We're losing 9 competitive Republican seats. But that's okay because we're gaining 11. This is a net gain, of course, of 2. And again, several states still coming in. But this is kind of where we stand right now. Democrats up 6, Republicans up 2. But we're a lot more fortified. The Democrats are just working with numbers right now. Okay, now let's go to Florida. Now this right here was a map that the Florida Senate came up with. And what's very interesting is that, again, not looking at the finer details, the outcome of this is that the net change was going to be +1 swing congressional district in the state of Florida. Now, for those of you that have been following this, you already know that Florida gained 1 seat because of the census and the population coming in. We should have had 2, but we got 1. And so this means that the Florida Senate, in their great wisdom, couldn't figure out a way to take 1 seat that we get gifted from the census and make that a Republican district. This is in spite of everything that all the positive trends we've had in 2016, 2018, 2022. These brilliant lawyers within the Florida Senate office couldn't come up with a way of getting us 1 solid Republican seat out of this new Senate district. Well, guess what? The Senate's worthless. Guess who's the president in the Senate? It's Ron DeSantis. So that gets thrown out. Garbage. Okay, now we get the House. The House tries a little bit harder, right? The House now gives us 1 solid Republican seat. Great, great. They're really doing fine work. But again, guess what? Chris Rawls ain't the Speaker of the House. Big Daddy Ron's the Speaker of the House these days. And guess what? Ron DeSantis isn't going to settle for 1 Republican seat. No, he ain't going to do that. So guess what? Never before in the history of the state of Florida does the governor propose a congressional redistricting map. This has never happened before. And so what does Big Daddy Ron do? He says, this is my map, guys. You're going to pass this thing. So, this is the map. This is a new version of this map that he proposed today. And this thing gives us +4 strong Republican seats. This gives us +2 swing Republican seats. And this gives us a juicy competitive seat on top of it. This can give us a 28 map in the state of Florida. That alone wipes out the gains the Democrats have managed playing on every other state in the union. One man, Ron DeSantis, is saying, this is my map, and we're going to get this done. Now, up here, you'll notice right up here, this is the Tallahassee district. This is where there's going to be a fight right now. Again, if we believe that Ron DeSantis is effectively the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, we'll see how that goes. The Supreme Court is different now than it was in 2014, where you had a Florida map changed. This actually played a big role in the Sutherland-Gwen Graham switch with that Florida 2 seat right there. The governor did ask for guidance on whether they could axe out the seat up here, Florida 5. The Supreme Court said, we're not going to rule on it, we need more information, so he got nothing there. But he doubled down. So this is actually a stronger and more aggressive map than the first one he proposed. And the left was freaking out about the first map he proposed. And so DeSantis, in spite of that court ruling, said, no, we're going to double down on this thing. Again, this is a massive, massive change. Again, this is Ron DeSantis evaporating all of the schemes of Illinois, New York, and all these states.
I don't see any lizards up there.
This is very interesting.
Yeah, the map
Those are
not
like straight
very-
lines and stuff.
I know, yeah. So that's the whole thing, yeah, too. Like, this is all, not a single thing here resembles the alien fighting predator. And these are all pretty organic, natural. Again, you've got your little areas here. The Tampa seat is one of those ones that are competitive. Again, South Florida is becoming increasingly competitive too, right? So this is very interesting. Goes back to the changing, and we want to follow the Hispanic approval rating of Biden there. But again, this right here, this is what winning really looks like. This is what fortifying yourself really looks like. This is what's translating popularity into power looks like. And Ron DeSantis is the best Republican in the country, the best Republican we've had in years doing this sort of thing. This is a work of art.
I didn't know he did that stuff.
That's incredible. And the thing, though, is that, again, DeSantis is fighting Republicans on this. Okay? Our dear friend Chris Sproul, our dear friend Wilton Simpson, the same people that he had to crush to get vaccine mandate, corporate mandates done and through, he had to overcome them. He's having to overcome these same people now. And so again, he's having to fight Republicans on this map. But he's going to fight, and he's going to win. Because he's Ron DeSantis in Florida in 2022. Now, this is not the only way the Democrats are going to win. What's important to understand is that there's nothing more dangerous than a weak regime. And what we have right now, as highlighted by everything we saw with all the data in the past, we're dealing with a weak regime. And so what do you do if you're a political party and you can't pass any legislation, right? Going back to that state-by-state breakdown of job approval ratings for Joe Biden, guess what state has the lowest job approval rating for Joe Biden? West Virginia. So guess what? Does anyone think that Joe Biden caring about something and going into West Virginia and trying to lobby, trying to whip up support against Joe Manchin is going to do anything to threaten what Joe Manchin is going to do on a vote? No. Right. Joe Biden campaigning against Joe Manchin is the best way possible for Joe Manchin to keep his seat, right? Arizona, a little bit better, not that much better, right? So you're not going to get Sinema out there. Sinema, who's been censored by your own political party at this point. They're not going to pass legislation. They can't get the votes in the Senate. So what do? They're going to stage things, right? This is, of course, the very solemn occasion of January 6, 2001. All right, 2022. Where we had to remember all the great sacrifices that our members of Congress made on this day.
The sacrifice many pairs of underwear.
Right. And so this is going to be increasingly what they rely upon. We've already seen that today, so this doesn't work great. This is kind of similar. Terry McAuliffe already tried to play this campaign in the Virginia race. Trump, crazy, whatever. But this isn't working, right? Because guess what? When gas is $3.50 down the road, people don't care about members of Congress being really, really scared a year ago, right? But they are going to try to weaponize this every way they can. This is why what's going on right now is so important with members. This is Paul Gosar, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Louis Gohmert. One of the issues that I think is very important right now is the treatment of the prisoners from January 6th. These are political prisoners that are being abused, and this is the sort of treatment that we did not see given violent protesters of the left during everything they did. When they had Trump, the Trump administration was criticized for its heavy-handed prosecutions of the protesters and the rioters. Remember the limo that got torched during his inauguration in 2017. The Department of Justice dropped all charges against those protesters in 2018 after 2017, right? Not a single one of them spent a day behind bars in federal prison, a long period of time in federal prison, dealing with the sort of abuses that the January 6th prisoners are going on right now. And the thing is, I've not heard Neil Dunn say a damn thing about this issue. There's very few, but there's some speaking out about this. What's interesting is that the treatment of these prisoners is not particularly controversial, right? This isn't a conspiracy theory that, we can't see what's going on in these prisons, and so we're assuming that Marjorie Taylor Greene's telling the truth when she talks about these things. So no, this is the Daily Beast, right? Which is, usually just enjoys tabloid sort of articles about Trump. Furious judge finds jail officials in contempt for abuse of January 6 prisoners. And it's because they are actively depriving these people of medical care, right? This is what was going on. This is right there in the public.
Depriving them of Medicare. You think they were disabled veterans?
Exactly. Now, what was also interesting is on this day, on January 6, 2022, there was a very concerted effort by Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene to try to counter-program what was a onslaught of propaganda about how January 6 was this most horrific attack on American democracy they've ever seen.
It's all a lie.
And one of the things that's interesting is that, again, like, even if you want to, if we accept their own narrative about January 6th, right? Let's accept their narrative that you had violent people break into the Capitol and do bad things, they shouldn't have been there, yada, yada, yada. Yet let's take every fact that they accept of this day at face value. Well, guess what? You had bombs going off within the Capitol because of the Weather Underground back in the day, right? You had Puerto Rican nationalists who were bombing the Capitol. There's some of the FLAN terrorist group that Bill Clinton pardoned on his way out of the office, right? The idea that, again, none of that's okay. The idea that what went on January 6th in the worst portrayal was equal to literal bombs going off in the Capitol is absurd. It's a political narrative. It's a political narrative of a desperate administration that is floundering and therefore needs to create a boogeyman to run against because it can't pass meaningful legislation and can't do anything to make a difference in your life. This is what they're doing. They're trying to set up show trials. They've openly talked about the need to have January 6th committee hearings on primetime television so that the American population understands how important this is. This is all theater. This is all propaganda. Because this is all they have left, is to try to get Americans to really care about this issue so that they view your average Republican voter as a domestic terrorist that they don't want to be in. This might sound familiar with some of the stuff going on in Canada, which I'm going to address in a moment. But this is all they have left. The only thing they have with the economy the way it is to try to demonize the political opposition. And that's why what they're doing right now is the counter-programming aspect. Asking about who is right X. What about, the possibility that you had federal agents as provocateurs that were actively involved with having protesters cross into the Capitol, to break those lines. The people that were the first ones to break into the Capitol, they were not at the Trump rally. They were stationed ahead of time. Ray Epps was not at the Trump rally. He was outside of the Capitol. And this is exactly what they've done time and time again. This is the standard operating procedure of the FBI. Right? Here we have an article from BuzzFeed. It was going into the details of the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot. Right? And what did BuzzFeed, which is certainly no traditional conservative outlet, find? They found that 12 of the 14 people that were arrested on the Gretchen Whitmer thing were feds. They were either informants or active agents. The escape of this, there's a book called Terror Factory. This became the standard operating procedure during the War on Terror. They would instigate someone, they'd take someone who was depressed or a little crazy in online chat rooms, and they'd go, hey guy, you're angry? Oh, you don't like what's going on in the Middle East? Hey, have you ever considered bombing someone? Here's how you do it. And what they do is that you'd have federal agents get someone who, maybe not had his free screws loose, who were a little out there, and they were incentivizing this guy, making him feel like he'd be a bigger person, that he could leave a lasting impact on something, that he could fulfill jihad if he simply bombed something, and the FBI was there to thwart the plot that the FBI organized. And of course, it's a great thing if your budget is dependent upon thwarting terrorist attacks, right? Now, this was, of course, not effective at stopping actual things, right? We still don't know what went on in Vegas and that whole shooting. Who cares? All that Nashville bombing that we had that we had last year. Who remembers that? Not important. This is the standard operating procedure of the Department of Justice. And what we're seeing time and time again, tools and techniques that were used in the 2000s against terrorists in the Middle East and their allies here at home, whether it goes into things like this where you're creating plots and then foiling them, or when it comes to using financial weapons to debank you, right? Everything that was used in the war on terror is now being used right now in the war on domestic terror, and all of us are prime suspects. This is what a weak regime looks like. And if they cannot win at the ballot box, they're going to do everything they can to mount show trials and to try to leverage everything they can to take other tools that they have to try to gauge the political process because they don't want to lose control. They understand the consequences of losing control. And of course, if we want to see the length that they will go to, we just recently had a new release from the Durham investigation, going into Russiagate and the origins of that. And what did they find? They found that Democratic operatives were paying people to spy on Donald Trump. They were spying on his web services within Trump Tower. They were spying on him within the White House. With the levels of security within it, it would be difficult to believe that no one caught on to this, right? And so there's a level here where they were just willing to let it go on, right? There was massive cooperation within this. And this is the lengths that they will go when they fear losing control. And this happened in 2016 when they were still kind of arrogant, right? They still thought that it's absolutely crazy to consider Donald Trump actually beating Hillary Clinton. Well, guess what? By 2020, they knew it wasn't so crazy. Their tools became a little more advanced. Going in 2022, they know it's very likely. And so what will they do? Because these people, politics is not about the election process. It's about what you can do to make sure the election process falls your way. And the Democrats are going to explore every single nook and cranny that they have to do this. This is why you see the nonstop propaganda on. You see such a common narrative from so many media outlets. This is why you saw. I think this was one thing that led to the amplification of concerns over COVID, because the health concerns over COVID helped provide cover for vote by mail, a massive expansion of the vote by mail process, which is the least secure process of voting, right? There's all sorts of ways that you provide cover that then allow actual dirty politics to then prosper. And this is nothing new. This goes back as long as Americans had elections. This is, and the thing is, we have to compete in this game. Simply saying this isn't right, who cares? It's not right. Fine, it exists. How do we beat it? And that's the great thing about Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is simply saying, oh, well, it's outrageous that New York is gerrymandering like this. We're going to show them the right way of doing things because we're going to make sure we're fair and balanced. Right? That's self-defeating. You have them trying to make sure that they use everything they can to crush their enemies, and we want to show how fair we are because we believe being fair is going to somehow give us some sort of superpower. And we're going to be, no, that's not the way politics works. Ron DeSantis says, no, we're going to make sure that Florida is protected. We're going to make sure that our districts represent our political interests. This is what actual leadership looks like. This is all the lengths that they're going to go. Everything's on the table. And that includes, what terrifies me, there was that rally at Capitol Hill with RFK Jr. and also people rallying against mandates. And you had a very diverse coalition. You had Evangeline Lilly, who's a Marvel actress, who came out and said, I've always been pro-choice, and so I'm coming out here standing for bodily autonomy. Completely rational view. This is what consistency looks like. And she was harassed because, how dare you be with a bunch of Nazi whatevers, right? I was concerned, anytime now you have a massive gathering of conservatives, or just simply, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. certainly isn't a conservative, but simply having a group of people that go against the narrative, you have to be terrified about things like this. Yeah. And so we have to keep this in mind, that this is the sort of stuff that we have to have, this sort of doubt in the federal government. Because this is what we've seen. This is what the federal government has shown that they are. And when someone tells you who they are, believe them. Now again, we're going to interesting to see whatever comes out more from this special investigation on the Russiagate stuff. There are people in the know who's claim that there's going to be enough evidence in Durham's Russia probe to indict multiple people. We'll see. My expectations are low. My hope is low. I always prefer to be pleasantly surprised in this sort of stuff. I don't have a lot of faith in some of these institutions. But again, this is a scandal. This is a big deal. And the media doesn't cover it. And they're trying to dismiss it. Oh, there's stuff here. And of course, I think when we talk about weak regimes and we talk about the lengths people are willing to go to stop a political threat, I do want to take a few moments to talk about Canada. Because what we have right now is that this man, Justin Trudeau, the son of Fidel Castro,
Yes.
he's waged war against his countrymen. He is, this week, they have used emergency powers that are reserved for war to go after truckers and those that are willing to support them. I mean, literal anti-terrorism measures are being used. Banks can now shut down your account without any due process.
Yeah.
They are confiscating fuel and whatever. They are threatening going after the children of the people protesting. And why are these people protesting? It's because this man has deprived these people, going back to the medical bill, this guy has deprived these people of the ability to work. These are desperate individuals. These are Canadians. These are citizens. And this man is placing his edicts ahead of their basic civic rights. The good thing here is that this is a weak man. This is a pathetic coward. This is a man who will bow and bow the knee to violent protests as long as it goes to the causes that he agrees with. He will refuse to defend his fellow Canadians. And say what you will, these Canadians are waking up. The Toronto Star, which is by no means some sort of crazy right-wing outlet, I mean, they're saying that this man has got to go. This Trudeau's career will. If there's any sense of justice in this world, Trudeau's career is done with this. This is the actions of a tyrant, in all the sense of the word. And what's funny is that these same sort of people are the ones that will say that, oh, well, we've got to make sure that we're defending Ukraine, so we defend democracy of Ukraine against the autocracy, against this evil Putin government. Well, guess what? Trudeau's actions are on a scale. I mean, this is as bad as anything Putin has been alleged with in terms of the process of governing. I don't know if Trudeau's poisoned anyone. There's those sort of accusations, right? Whatever. But in terms of the actual abuse of the regime, I mean, this is as big as what you expect from any sort of despot. And this has become the normalized thing within the Western liberal society, right? This is Trudeau. The difference between Canada and New Zealand is simply that Canadian truckers are willing to fight. They've been more organized. There's been some great videos actually from New Zealand, particularly the indigenous populations, like standing up and protesting that shrew of a prime minister outside of her office. I've been doing like the chanting and things like that, all harmonized. The Australian stuff. I mean, the country of Australia was literally putting their people in concentration camps because of COVID. Okay, this is not what liberalism was ever supposed to be. This is an abuse of this sort of stuff. And this is what happens when you have weak people in positions of power. These are people not governing by the consent of the people. They're not governing based on meritocracy. He is having to resort to pure, brutal authoritarianism. And the good thing is that this stuff doesn't work. This stuff is painful. This stuff is terrible. This stuff is horrific. And every single Canadian a trucker should be doing everything they can to protect themselves. In the short term, this is awful. In the long term, this fails. Because what makes states strong is not the police force. It is not brutality. What makes states strong is when they do not have to abuse their powers like this to get the public to follow them. What made George W. Bush back in the 2000s, and he did things I didn't like, what made him strong is that the people were behind him after 9/11. He didn't have to threaten to arrest anyone that spoke up against him. The people were following him based off patriotism. Trudeau's not leading with patriotism. He is leading by othering his opponents, by dehumanizing them, calling them Nazis. And so that is exactly why what he used to demean as a fringe minority has taken control of large parts of Canadian cities. And you actually see Trudeau's approval rating now is underwater, not only with those that support the truckers, but with the people that oppose the truckers. And what's been beautiful to see is the speeches in the Canadian Parliament condemning him for dividing that country, to escalating tensions. And of course, the crazy thing is that this double down on mandates and COVID tyranny is coming at a time where his neighbor to Michigan, right, Gretchen Whitmer, right, herself quite familiar with COVID tyranny, she's withdrawing the COVID measures that Trudeau is trying to fight on, right? Europe, is getting rid of all of the remaining COVID restrictions. Canada is doubling down. This isn't going to work. People see through this. And thankfully, I think we're going to see, before too long, a Canada without Justin Trudeau. But this is what a weak regime looks like, though. And this playbook, everything that he's doing now, is what we should expect a desperate Biden Democratic Party to do going forward. Because they have nothing else. They can't lead on the merits. They're destroying our livelihoods. They can only lead by force. And that's going to require patriots standing up and fighting back. So that is a breakdown, I think, on some of the trends to look for when we go through 2022. Again, this should be a great year. We have a lot to be optimistic about. The congressional races are looking very, very good. Florida's never been redder. I think we're going to see gains in the state legislature. I think, even these controversial bills, right, there's been some concern, right, that, states like Texas and Alabama and some of these things pushing the abortion issue is going to lead to some sort of backlash with moderate voters. I don't think that's happening. Again, in particular, guess what pro-life legislation is very popular with? Hispanic voters, which again, that's something that we have to keep going back to when we talk about the political realignment. This is a very important trend, right? We have a lot to be optimistic about. We have a lot to be thankful for. But we also need to recognize the lengths the enemy will go in fighting back. And that's what we're going to continue to do every month here at the Republican Roundtable, is watching them, keeping informed, staying up to date. And I thank you all for joining us yet again. This is going to be a great 2020. Thank you very much. Do you guys have any questions on that? It's a good rant right there.
When's he up for election?
Yes, sir. Well, in Canada, they call parliamentary, they call elections. So they had an election last year.
He had one. He knew this was all coming. He had an election so he could keep himself solid after this.
Yeah, and what Trudeau was trying to do was trying to consolidate power. He was trying to call election during a pandemic because he thought he was going to benefit him politically. It turned out being a wash. There was absolutely no change in the political scales there. But again, what's interesting is because Canada does have a parliamentary process. Trudeau's party is in coalition with a Democratic Socialist Party. It's funny because the Democratic Socialist Party is backing Trudeau because it turns out Democratic Socialists really don't care about organized workers. Surprise, surprise, how that happened. But there is some interesting dynamics going on there. Unfortunately, the Conservative Party isn't very good either. It's very squishy. There's a very strong former Conservative leader named Maxime Bernier. He's a very fascinating guy. He's been tip of the spear on this sort of stuff. He's either radical. I mean, he fit into this group. But he left. He got deprived of the leadership position within the Conservative Party because of backroom politics and Canadian dairy farmers and a corrupt bargain, all sort of stuff. Very interesting. But so he started his own party, the Canadian People's Party, which was trying to tap into disgruntled conservatives and libertarians, and it hasn't quite worked out yet. So the downside is what's going to fill up the void. Some of the conservative leaders are getting better on this issue, so maybe the Conservative Party will recognize that there's something to go here. I wish Bernier was still a conservative because this would make this process a whole lot easier. But it'll be interesting when you have a call for a new election. There's various ways that can happen. Parliamentary politics is very interesting in its own right and has its own rules of the game. But again, I think Trudeau's numbers are... When we have mainstream media outlets in Canada openly talking about Trudeau going down, there's something there to be watched. Yeah.
The media industry, they're paid by...
It's even worse up there than it's... I mean, there's an outlet called Rebel News, that's kind of their version of Fox. I mean, it's a little crazier than Fox. Not necessarily that's a bad thing, but it's not as professionalized as Fox, and so it has its own reputation. So it's not as effective. It's more like Breitbart than Fox, which again, there's some value in that, but it's a little bit different. So there's so many advantages that we have as Americans in terms of this process. Again, for all of our failings, and we got a lot of weak people, and the Republican Party in D.C. is full of losers, and we've got to we have to clean up our houses, and that's we've got a lot of work to do. But our advantages that we have relative to Canada, relative to the UK, certainly relative to Australia and New Zealand, you know, and any other Anglo countries, relative to Europe, relative to South America. I mean, you know, we're still the best place you could possibly be, in spite of how far below we're flying on our promise. But we still have a lot to be thankful for. Yes, Charlie?
First of all, I'd like to say I resent the repeated references you have to the fact that I was connected in the past part of my life to Illinois. Okay? I resent that. Okay? And I will be very upset if you point out that I was actually born in Massachusetts.
I know. I was going to let that one just be a secret between the two of us.
Okay, but more seriously, when do we expect the 3 Florida maps to be adopted?
Yeah.
And if you could give us a free say of the current and near-term status of the Florida Supreme Court.
Yeah. So the Senate map is dead. That House map is dead. Because I mean, DeSantis has threatened to veto. Has said he's going to veto those things, and DeSantis wouldn't threaten to veto those things if he wasn't prepared to veto those things. And so, whether or not the final bill, the final map is going to be the exact same as that one, there were a lot of changes between the second map that DeSantis proposed and the first one, particularly in South Florida, in various interesting ways. This process should be playing out and finalized in a couple weeks. There will be lawsuits, so like that's going to be, you know, there's no way of avoiding that. You know, this is something that's going to go into 2024. So you know, we're going to have a long time to talk about this sort of stuff. But the end result is going to look much more like DeSantis' map than any of the other 2 chambers. And the House has already been trying to put in place some compromise maps. The House did one that took that seat, that district up there, and kind of put in a Democrat district that would carve out like half of Tallahassee and would go all the way over to Jacksonville. And this is a way of dealing with a potential Voting Rights Act challenge here. I know, my understanding is that there's a South Florida seat that's changed here that might also get a challenge on the Voting Rights Act. I don't have a quick solution to that. But we're going to get something, it might not be 28, but at the very least we should expect 1810. But we're going to get something much closer to this than the other. In the next couple of weeks is when we should know about that. In terms of the Supreme Court is significantly more conservative than it was 4 years ago, 6 years ago. I mean, that was one of the things that's very interesting about DeSantis is that he came in with kind of in his pocket like a greatest hits list of what Trump did, and so he started off very energetic. Like that first week, you know, he was kicking out the sheriff in Broward County. He was kicking out corrupt members of the school board. One of them over in Okaloosa. He doubled down on the Supreme Court stuff using the same sort of Federalist list that Trump trumpeted, right? And so he did all these little like Florida versions of like the big bravado Trump stuff. And so from the very get-go, he was working on these sort of gains. And so I don't think we're going to have, the expectation is that any challenge from the Supreme Court is going to be given every benefit of the doubt. Take that for what it's worth. But it's much stronger now, in spite of the fact that we've still had, it was still a nominally Republican-controlled Supreme Court. It just turns out that a Supreme Court justice that Republican Charlie Crist picks is a little bit different than the Supreme Court justice that Republican Ron DeSantis picks. And for that, we can all be very thankful. Yes, Ken?
So on the way in here, I was listening to Radio Handy was talking about the Durham thing. And I think it's really important for people to understand that the claim is that there were contractors abusing their access to government information systems that enabled this spying, this tracking of a sitting president and an existing presidential candidate. And that's what makes it different from opposition research.
Right, yes.
These weren't guys sitting in their own basement doing their own thing. They were abusing their access to government systems to spy on the president.
Yeah. This is a high-tech version of Watergate.
Yeah, a lot
Right.
worse than Watergate.
And what's interesting is that a lot of the techniques that are used here, very similar stuff can be done to any of us. So that there's always this sort of expectation when you have some of these tools created that they will be always used on the masses, right, for legitimate state reasons. The difference in this case was that they used it for explicitly vulgar politics because of how different Trump was as a candidate relative to, again, I don't think Hillary Clinton would have spied on Jeb Bush. For as crazy as Hillary Clinton is, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think she'd have any ethical problem of doing it. I think that the dynamic there was just different, right? You know, I don't think she would have spied on Mitt Romney. I don't even think she would have spied on Ted Cruz. You know, she might have wanted to punch Ted Cruz, but like that would have been, you know, I don't think she would have, you know, like Trump was just different in this regard, and so, you know, this is what happens when you have techniques that have been developed by government officials and the various contractors that make up and allow them to do a lot of what they do, when you're now being weaponized for explicitly political ends. And so again, the fallout of that, again, I'm not overly optimistic about accountability. I would love to be proven wrong. You know, I want to see. If anyone out there sees Dr. Dunn, I keep trying to contact his office to get him to sign on to a pledge demanding a Republican majority in the House to investigate Fauci for all of his wrongdoings and lies to Congress. Various other Republican members of Congress have already signed this pledge. Neil Dunn's people, I think they still don't like my last op-ed in the News Herald about him. That's fine. That's their prerogative. But this is the sort of stuff that should be status quo. Accountability matters. And because if we don't pursue accountability as a Republican Party, then this sort of stuff is going to keep going on.
That's what's really wrong now.
Yeah.
It's because they let it go for so long.
Yes.
That it's so bad now that I don't know if you're ever going to be able to get it in place.
It's not that every single person in the FBI or in these agencies is a bad actor. But when there's no right, when you cover for the bad actors, you know, then it ends up spoiling these entire institutions. I think it's a very dangerous thing when the political stakes are as high as they are, and when the culture, again, the difference between someone who resides in D.C., the way that you view the world, is so fundamentally different than the way you view it in just about any other city, just because of how isolated it is. And like it's so easy just to think differently of other Americans and to start belittling them and to dehumanizing them. And again, this is something that we've just seen time and time again. This is the entire process that we've seen play out in COVID, right? Is the scapegoating of fellow Americans. And you know, I'm not going to say that conservatives haven't been guilty of this in the past. This is not something the left has a monopoly on. But the size and scale of this, and the acceptance of this, and the enforcement of this, is something very dangerous. And it's something that it allows for a great deal of dangerous things to happen in the pursuit of political power, particularly if you view the other side as a genuine threat. And if Trump runs for re-election, or runs for election again in 2024, he's going to be seen as a threat. You know, he's not going to be seen as a normal candidate. This is why they're trying to prevent Madison Cawthorn. Well, I like Madison Cawthorn. I don't think he's necessarily the most radical person in Congress. But they're trying to keep Madison Cawthorn off the ballot for the voters of North Carolina to decide on this sort of stuff, utilizing January 6th and him speaking at the Trump rally as justification. And you have the North Carolina Board of Election, you know, the Supervisor of Elections Board or whatever institution they have, saying that we have the authority to unilaterally kick you off from the ballot and not appearing at all. These little choke points, this is where power lies. This is why it was so important to declaw medical boards in the way that they could penalize people for having political thoughts that they don't like. Right? You know, all these little third-party institutions, all these little choke points. These are the sort of stuff that the left is really good at weaponizing. This is exactly why George Soros spent so much money on DA offices. They recognize some of these unsexy positions of where the real action's at. Anything else? Well, fantastic. Well, again, this has been the first Republican Roundtable of 2022. Again, thank you so much again for joining us. If you are not aware, on this Saturday, there is a Mardi Gras parade going on in St. Andrews with the Bay County Republican Party. There is both a parade float, if you want to walk in the parade and throw out beads and hand out DeSantis bumper stickers. And I'll tell you what, we had the Panama City Beach Mardi Gras parade last weekend, and I believe we got the loudest cheers of any booth out there when they announced it was the Bay GOP.
If you came late and didn't sign in, please try and sign in on your way out.
Yes, thank you. And one of the great things is that we've got a lot of DeSantis bumper stickers to hand out during the parade, and again, people get excited for that as they do the big beads and moon pies. That's a great thing. Yes.
Just wanted to let everybody know who isn't aware that DeSantis was in the new North Shore neighborhood down the road from my home. Chris Young was having a invitation, $1,500 just to get in, fundraiser, $5,000 for a picture with DeSantis, and $10,000 is what I heard for to have dinner with DeSantis. But it's probably over by now.
Yeah, and we are working with the DeSantis campaign to get some events that don't cost $1,500, so we're working on that. Next Tuesday, I'm working out the details. There's a fundraiser out in Walton County for Anthony Sabatini, a friend of mine who's running for Congress down in in Central Florida. He's very much my sort of Republican. Take that for what it's worth. But I'm trying to, we're working on trying to do a meet and greet prior to the fundraiser at the Trump store. So I'll be sending out an email on that as soon as we get confirmed with his scheduling. But if you like, my brand of Republican politics, if you like Trump, if you like Matt Gaetz, Anthony Sabatini gives you all of that with a little less weirdness in some ways, which I think is I'm very excited to see him in Tallahassee, or in Washington, D.C., and he's going to offend all the right people. So again, that's going to be next Tuesday, probably around 4-ish, but I will be sending out an email out there as soon as we get the times confirmed. And I'll be representing the Bay County Republican Party at CPAC this year, where we're going to be doing some events. I'm trying to bring down a few candidates that I've been helping with. There's a candidate, Mike Collins, who is running for Georgia 10, a seat near and dear to my heart because it is the home of the University of Georgia. He is a trucker by trade, which is a very timely thing right now. I'm trying to get him down to an event down here. I've been helping him with some stuff. So we've got a lot of great Republican candidates running that are not in office right now. I think we're setting up a very strong reinforcement group within D.C. I'm still going to have I'm still not a Kevin McCarthy fan, and I've got a lot of concerns about leadership there. But I think we are building up a stronger bench of Republicans to take the fight to them. So we have more Republicans thinking like Ron DeSantis in those sweet maps. Yes. Yes. So we got a lot of work to do. But again, thank you guys for coming out and being a part of it.